So, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome real estate specialist, expert negotiator with a PhD in political science, Amy Cox. So, welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Amy, firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. Can you please share with us how your career started and what led you to a career in academia?
Sure. It's a little bit of a twisting, turning story. So I've always had a personality that's very inquisitive and curious, and probably overly analytical. So
Yeah.
when I was growing up, I always challenged like my teachers, my parents, ideas, theories. I had gone to a Christian school and just found myself just really wanting to understand how people work, how things work. And so I was always just a big reader, and I enjoyed studying,
Yes.
well, to some extent. Um,
Yeah, some
and
people have a
so I
knack
got a,
for it and other people struggle with it. So,
yeah, yeah, I was definitely, it just came, I don't want to say it came easily to me, but I just had a real like drive to learn.
yes.
And I still do. So I got a bachelor's in philosophy as an undergrad degree, and I was fascinated by World War II and this school called the Frankfurt School, which was essentially a lot of German Jews who left Germany and came to New York largely and started the new school. And they wrote a lot about how it came to be that World War II happened, like how it came to be that all these Germans essentially participated in the Holocaust. And I just could not kind of wrap my head around, human nature, really. Like
Yeah.
what was it that created the space that to happen? How is it that people who are, all kind of in a society that seemingly got on quite well for a long time, found themselves kind of ready to kill each other?
Yes.
So so it was in the middle of that I went to Northern Ireland on a trip with a friend of mine, and I didn't know anything about the IRA or this kind of ongoing conflict in Northern Ireland. But when we got there, we got to Belfast, and there was there were military everywhere, and there was something that now we kind of are more used to, but like incredible amounts of security at the airport. And there was armed guards outside of malls, and we went to visit friends of ours, and they showed us, they gave me a rubber bullet that I still had that had gone through their window. And
Wow.
they started telling us like it was just so different than I just had never really thought about it. I was probably, I guess I was 23. And so we ended up going on this tour around Ireland, and I started talking to people and listening, and I read books about the IRA. And so I just got fascinated with conflict and terrorism, war, and why people want to kill each other. And Northern Ireland was sort of particularly interesting for me because I was like, you can't tell the difference between a Irish Catholic and an Irish Protestant by looking at them.
No,
Like
you
everybody looked the
can't.
same, like everybody
Yeah.
looks the same. They're all Christians, with in air quotes, like what,
They all
seemingly
believe in the
belonging to
same
one of the,
God. They just
yeah,
divided
yeah,
in different denominations.
right. And it wasn't like, I mean, in the United States, we certainly have a profound sense of difference between people of color and white people. So I was sort of, I understood that on some level, but I just couldn't quite grasp, like, what are you fighting about, right?
Yeah.
So I decided to get a master's degree in peace and conflict resolution, which included a lot of travel. So I thought, wow, this will be great. Like, I'll get to run around the planet and sort of just observe and sort of learn like what's going on. And I just had no idea. I didn't really, I didn't know that much about international politics. So I got this master's degree. And by the time I was done my master's, I still didn't have the answers to the
Yeah.
questions that I had.
Yeah.
So my mentor at the time was like, go get a PhD. And I thought, all right. It wasn't like I had this like profound need to go get a PhD. I guess I kind of at the time thought, I really am curious. I want to know more. And so I did. I went to McGill in Canada, and interestingly enough, in Montreal, in Canada, they have this divide there between the Quebecois and English, the Anglo population of Canada.
Yes.
So it was there too. Um,
So it's
so
everywhere you went.
it was, and I was like, this is like a whole other lens through which to see the world.
Mm,
And so I ended up studying and getting, I mean, it's a political science PhD, but my focus was really international politics.
mm,
And at the root of that is just sort of this fascination with power and money, just like who has power, who doesn't, how is that used, how do you get the haves and the have-nots? And so I finished my PhD, which was, I have to tell you, a bit of a miracle because there was a lot of failures in that process for me. I did finish, thank God, but
yes.
it was not, it was no easy feat, I'll say, at least for me.
Yes.
Um, so I came back to Philadelphia where my family's from, and I was like, I guess I need a job. So I
Yeah.
I ended up working at the university where I got my master's degree. And so I did a little adjuncting there, and then I became the director of a master's program in international peace and conflict resolution, which was the same program that I had got my master's from.
Yes.
So that is how I landed in academia. And while I was there, it was phenomenal. Like, it was a really interesting set of experiences, and I learned a tremendous amount being there.
That's an amazing and incredible experience for you as well. And just
Oh,
to be
for
able
sure.
to expand your perspective on it. So um, that leads me obviously to being a professor, and after 10 years of higher education, I'm the director of a master's degree program in international peace and conflict resolution. You decided to leave and look for new challenges. So can you share with us more about that experience within your position for those 10 years, and what prompted you to change your career path?
Sure. And this is a question that um, I reflect on frequently because it's a question that comes up all the time in real
Yes,
estate
I'm
when
sure.
people are like, "Oh, you have a PhD," and because I do kind of continue to keep that as part of my sort of profile, if you will, and my identity.
Yeah,
Um, and it's a okay. So I will say this: when I was there, my primary responsibilities were teaching, advising, and running this program. So as the director, I was doing everything from recruiting, marketing, interviewing, guiding students through their program out into the world. We had an internship program. They also had a global experience component, so we did a lot of traveling.
yeah,
And I took the students as groups, and then at times I would set up internships in different global locations for the students to go to. So it was really, in some ways, a continuation of the same, like, knowledge growth, skill development that I had been doing as a student. But I also developed this whole other set of skills around marketing, recruiting, in some ways, like pitching the program. I did a lot of recruitment fairs. And so I also, I was ultimately my own boss in that job, which I really liked. I have
yeah,
known for a long time that I think, going back to those roots of challenging professors and teachers, that don't have I don't have the best relationship with authority. Like,
yes.
I just am like, I don't really like to be told what to do. And it's not that I wouldn't say that that's necessarily entirely about thinking that I know the right answers all the time. I absolutely don't think that. I
Yeah,
think it's just more like, I think nobody has all the answers.
no.
And so I'll take
But it's also
instruction, but
not your personality. I mean, some
yeah.
people need to be told what to do and others don't. I'm the same. I don't like
Yes.
being told what to do.
Hmm. I'll take suggestions, but not demands.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
you know? So I learned that, like, I loved being my own boss.
Mm,
I also, because I was running the show by myself, the first year there was an assistant director. After that, the program was undergoing a lot of challenges and changes, and recruitment sort of fell off after 2013, or sorry, admittance and attendance. So I was really challenged. And I learned that I'm completely self-motivated. Like, I don't actually need anybody to tell me what to do. And I think getting a PhD is that as well. It's like, if you don't figure out how to do it yourself to a large extent, it's not going to happen.
No.
So I definitely, I became really clear that that was not an issue for me. I did not need somebody like a time clock to kind of keep me working. Um, I loved the entrepreneurial aspects of that job.
Yes.
I developed new programs. I revamped that whole program from top to bottom and really changed its orientation. And um, I also had the opportunity to work with like brilliant people, which was amazing. Really absorbing and all the knowledge and skills from the people around me. We had a lot of workshops because conflict resolution is a very practical. Um, it's a very practical study, I guess you could say, where you're really actively engaged in skill building. So, and that was like negotiation, mediation, advocacy, activism. We did all of that. And so I learned a lot of it and I loved all of it. I thought it was great. I really liked the practical aspects of it. And I learned, I think, towards the end, it had become really clear to me that I was not really cut out for academia. I really
Yes.
wasn't all that. I was not interested in, I didn't love teaching. I'm much more interested in being a student than I am a teacher. And probably in some of the same ways that I didn't like authority, I also didn't really want to be authority. I
Yes.
just, I'm pretty much an anarchist at my heart. I really just am kind of like, I think I tend to think that people are like me, which is like, you'll just Google it, figure it out. Like, and
Yeah.
that really doesn't go well in many ways as a teacher. People want more from you. And
Yes.
it didn't come easily to me. And it was an uphill battle every step of the way. Um, so I did figure out that it was a mismatch
Yes.
but I liked certain parts of it. So I started exploring like, how can I take the parts of this that I like and continue to do them, um, but leave some of the other pieces behind. The other thing is, is I really like the hustle and the pace of an exciting environment.
Yes.
So when I would like put on conferences and there was a lot of organizing and there was a lot of opportunity to meet with a whole bunch of different people, like I loved all of that. So then it was like, honest to goodness, like making lists, trying to figure out like what is out there for me to do that has some of these things that does not require me going back to school. Because I was clear that at 36 and like 20 years of higher education, that I was not going back to school again for
Yes.
any like, it wasn't like, oh, let me go get an MBA now. No.
No.
I thought about it for a minute and I thought about it again. I was like, law school. I always wanted to go to law school. And I was like, I will never make it through another 3 years of intense schooling.
Yeah.
And my family is in real estate. My dad, my grandfather, my great uncle, my great grandfather, they were all commercial. They were on the commercial side. But
Yes.
so all of a sudden through conversations with a friend of mine who's an awesome mentor and guide, it kind of like hit me all at once that I'm like, oh my gosh, I could totally do real estate. And I'll never forget that somebody, when I was at McGill, I was really involved in student politics there, and I was the president of the postgraduate student society, and this alumni development director said to me, "You would be amazing at sales." And I thought, nobody wants to be in sales. Like, no, I'm getting a PhD. I'm not going to be in sales.
Yes.
Why would I do that now? And sure enough, like it kind of hit me that she had said that to me. And I thought, then I started talking to people in real estate and realized that I could shift into this uh, career path with 2 classes,
Mm.
which I could do online. And I was like, well, that I can handle without, throwing myself off a bridge.
Yes.
And 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 then right at the time that I kind of figured out that, hey, this real estate thing could really be a great fit for me. It's familiar territory. I understand how it works. I can take a couple classes. My parents, my dad is still got a lot of connections in this area, so that could serve me well. Um, Arcadia, my school at the time, was going through a shift and
Mm.
a reorganization, and they were trying to get rid of professors. Honestly, they needed to downsize, and so they put out an opportunity to get basically a severance package of a full year. Because the one thing about moving into real estate is you can't you're not going to make good money for at least a year. You're
Yeah.
not go. So if you've got, if you're married and you have or a partner or whatever, and they can support you while you kind of transition into this new field, but it takes time to develop a, to develop relationships with people, to get yourself out there. And you don't have a lot of money to start advertising too.
No.
You know what I mean? Most people don't
And it's
have,
also highly competitive.
oh gosh, it's very competitive.
Yeah.
So it was like the universe lined up and said, here you go. Take the severance package, get paid for a year, and get busy. And so I literally felt like I could not have written the script for this moment in my life at all.
Mm.
There was no, I did not see this coming at all, that I was going to A, want to shift into real estate, and B, how I was going to do that. I thought, well, I'll do this for one more year. I'll be a director for one more year, and I'll try to get this real estate business up and running on the side.
Yeah.
Well, thank God I didn't. I mean, I probably could have tried it, but I think it would have been very, very difficult. It's hard to succeed in this business doing it part-time. It's very hard.
Yes.
So, and the director job was not a 9 to 5, 40-hour week anyway. It was all over the place. So that was it. Like, that was the shift. It was like, I have all these marketing and recruiting skills and negotiation skills, all these things that I really love, that I totally enjoy doing. And now I have the opportunity to shift into this field where I can use all of those things. And I've been given a grace period of a year to get it off the ground. I mean, I could not have, yeah, like I said, I couldn't have dreamed it up. I could not have, figured out, I couldn't have made this work if I didn't,
No, it's
if it
incredible.
just, the door just opened. Yeah. Like the
Yeah.
door just opened, and it was like, all right, well, you go through it then,
And everything was just energetically aligned, for sure.
That
So,
is exactly how I would describe it. Yeah.
so going in, so obviously, as a Philadelphia native and fourth generation realtor with advanced education and training in conflict mediation and politics, how did this help you in real estate? And do you think that this gave you a unique advantage? And what are some of the biggest lessons and learnings within your career?
Okay. So, that's a lot. Okay. So
Sorry.
no, it's good. It's good. I always tell people, like, in any kind of, I'm like, listen, I over communicate. I am a storyteller, and I was a teacher for, 15 years. So I tend to talk a lot. So this is good. It forces me to, like, focus. So, background. Okay. My family's background. I think the biggest one there was that I was familiar with it. It was not foreign to me. I understood the language. I knew, my grandfather had been a broker, and he was a big part of, and an appraiser, and he was a big part of my life. And so, and as well with my dad. So he was a property manager, and, I felt like, they're giving me that background knowledge, a certain degree of familiarity and comfort with the language and that aspect of the business world, and also the connections that they had. Like, I have a recognized last name in certain pockets, because I'm really in residential. They were almost all in commercial, but there's definitely an overlap, with developers in particular. So, and all of coming back to Philadelphia, like, I had been involved in so many different things. I worked in a ton of restaurants when I was younger, and was always out and about. So I knew a lot of people back here. And I think in some ways people were not surprised that somehow I ended up in real estate, and that it was like a natural fit because of my family. So that definitely set me up for success, I think, from the get-go. Is that, I had connections. The education piece, I think I touched on this a little bit. Like, mostly it was, I think the thing that serves me very well is a comfort with, conflict resolution skills. Most of real estate, I think you could parse it out in several categories, but, like, a big chunk of it is people skills, right? Which I like people. I'm mostly an extrovert,
Yeah.
and it comes naturally. And I was so involved in student politics for so long that I definitely developed a hat that I could put on and take off with, engaging with people, recruiting, engaging in the sales aspects of both, and advocacy aspects of student politics and of being a director of the program. So I think, knowing that I enjoyed that and that it was comfortable for me, um, being with people, working with people, talking to people, convincing people, um, that definitely was a sort of something that I already had working for me. And then I think negotiations are tough. I think
Yes.
they're hard. They're uncomfortable for most people,
Yeah.
especially women, and having been trained in negotiation and done a lot of both at the theory level, because, when we're talking about war and conflict, that is just all about negotiations and how
Yes.
they use different tools, right? So sometimes the negotiation includes a bomb, which is certainly less than ideal.
Yes.
Um, but it's still, there's a quote that's like, war is just politics, by other means.
Yes.
So that negotiation piece was something that I was very familiar with as well, trained in it, tons of workshops. And I didn't feel intimidated by it. And so that has served me exceptionally well. I actually enjoy negotiating, where I think most other people run in the other direction.
Yes.
Um, so that served me well. And the last thing I would say is that I'm data driven, because I had to do so much research for so long. And when I
Yes.
was director of that program, I had to learn how to be director. I didn't really have a lot of guidance when I ended up in that position. So I learned as I went, and I Googled and read and studied, and, trying to figure out how to do that job well. So, real estate, especially today, is a lot about data,
Yes.
especially like I work a lot with millennials, and they are very computer savvy. So they know where to look for houses. I have to fill in all the other blanks.
Yes.
So being data driven, being able to do research, being able to like pull all that information together and present it in ways that people understand,
Mm.
that kind of gives them more information and allows them to make better choices. That is also, I think, the other thing that is basically my second nature at this point, is collecting data and sharing it. So that's served me really well. And I think those things do make me different in this field for sure. Um, the biggest lessons, was that the last part? The biggest
Yes. Yeah.
lessons,
So, what would you
challenges.
say some of your biggest lessons have been in your career?
Mm, so, um, helping, I think, expectations. Like, I have learned through every aspect of my life that setting people's expectations is essential to success. Resentment is just unmet expectations.
Yeah.
So you never know what other people's expectations are until you talk to them. But even then, it's sometimes really hard to understand, because if they don't necessarily know what they are, they're not going to be able to communicate them to me.
No.
So I do a lot of talking, right? I mean, I do a lot of expectation setting. Like, this is what the market's doing. This is what's going on. This is what you have to think about. This is what you need to prepare for. I mean, that's a really big part of my job, is constantly setting expectations with my clients so that they have uh, less stressful experience, so that there aren't as many surprises, because there's always surprises
Yes.
in this business, throughout the transaction process. So making sure that I, am constantly, setting those expectations so that they're realistic, and
Yes.
my clients end up having a positive experience overall. Obviously, there's moments that are just beyond my control, but that's definitely one big lesson learned.
Mm.
And ways that I've made plenty of mistakes along that way. And like, I heard somebody say yesterday, and I thought, wow, that's a great quote. It's like, I never learned anything from success. I only really ever learned from failure. And so
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of failure, and that's, I mean, I don't want to fail anybody, and I don't want to fail myself, but I also recognize that if I don't try, and sometimes it blows up in my face, but if I don't try, I'm never going to figure out how to do it correctly. um, so like, the expectations is definitely a learned lesson. Over communicate so everybody knows what's going on all the time. It's really easy when my clients especially, or other agents for that matter, but clients in particular, are so stressed out. They're nervous, they're anxious, they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They need they want to understand what's going on.
Yeah. And they
What
need their
where are we
hand
at?
held through the process, especially if it's a first time person buying, or, you
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly it. And I think I got that from working with students. Students who would come into a master's degree program, there was like a rhythm. And we would say that, like, by mid-October, everybody was having a meltdown. I don't belong here. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm not cut
yeah.
out for this. And I would like pull out a chart and be like, every single year, this is the time, because all of a sudden all your work is kicking in and your papers are due. And suddenly it's like, I can't do all of this.
Yeah.
So I think that's, that hand holding is, I'm okay with that. And and I'm used to it. And it's something that, um, I'm happy to do to make sure that my clients have a positive experience.
Yeah.
Um, I think the other two, I would say building solid relationships with other agents. This has been a recent, lesson learned, is that you have repetitive interaction with agents, so it's like one deal, but you might have 7, 10, 20, 30 deals over the course of a few years with the same agent. And if I don't treat the agent well, if I don't engage with them in a respectful and like, win-win with a win-win attitude, that's going to come back to bite me. And so
Yeah.
I'm starting to really understand and have been, working through this, that, while I want to win, quote unquote, and I want the best for my clients, I have to do that in a way where everybody wins and where everybody walks away from the table, happy,
Yes.
unsatisfied. So, making sure that I prioritize having good relationships with agents and that they can trust me and that I communicate with them as well, and set their expectations for that matter, right? Because they don't know what I'm doing, what's happening on my end with my clients, and the type of people. Some clients respond to stress with anger. Others just shut down and stop communicating, and so reading the situation and being able to, parlay that with another agent is, I think, really also important. And I would say the last thing is just being really honest. I'm a
Yes.
straight shooter, always have been, very like direct. It's a very Philadelphia trait. I understand. Canadians, I think, we're always like, oh my, these Americans,
Yeah,
Um,
Canadians are a lot sort of tamer and they're not as
yeah,
direct.
not as direct, not as edgy. And Philadelphia is definitely, our mascot is gritty. So that tells you something.
Yes.
So, it's a gritty. We're a little gritty. So I'm honest, and sometimes I think that is off-putting, but it's imperative for me. Like that's the
Yeah.
basis of my relationships with people, is to be honest. So, and that can come down to things like how pricing your house.
Yes.
Like I'm not gonna. I don't want to. I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh, let's overinflate the price, and that's what you get. I'd rather price it at, exactly at or slightly under the market value and drive up a competitive bidding process than I would
Yes.
have overprice it because the client is just insists that that's what their house is worth. I mean,
Yes.
obviously there's compromise in there, but so I try to really be honest. That's the other lesson. And I would say that's a lifelong lesson too. I mean, some of these just are ongoing life lessons. I think we get the same challenges over and over again in different forms until we get the lesson.
Yes.
Um, so I would say certainly the things that I've come across in real estate are not really all that different than the things that I've come across in academia, for
Yes.
sure.
So that leads me to the next question. COVID-19 has obviously turned our worlds upside down and inside out. So what and how have you had to adapt in these times? And can you give us some examples? And how do you believe this is changing the industry moving forward?
That's such a great question right now. One that is like forever on the top of the agenda for sales meetings and conversations. The thing is that I have been in this business now for 2 years, and really the first year and a half I was, getting my feet wet. So COVID for me hit early in my career, and many of the things that I had already, some of the changes that were already going on that have been sped up, because of COVID, were already things that I was learning. So, for instance, Zillow and Trulia and Redfin and all of these online sources, third party sources for houses, like in 20 years ago, that was not part of the real estate business at all. I remember my grandfather distinctly, it was like you picked up your clients, you were the one who would take them to all the properties, you would identify the properties based on the criteria that they gave you, and then you would take them and show them. They had no internet to look on and be like, let me look at 500 properties in the next 2 weeks, right? Like that was not something that was done. So in some ways, I've come into the real estate business at a time when some of these changes were already taking root. And I think older, real estate agents who've been in this business for a long time have been much more challenged to catch up to the digital, age
Yes.
than I have. So so for me, what I've seen is just more and more emphasis on things that I was already learning to emphasize. So online social use of social media, marketing, advertising. Again, like things that they used to do in real estate would be a lot of door to door knocking. You can't door to door knock in COVID. You
No,
know,
you
you can't
can't.
do that. You know, even things like sending mailings and dropping by gifts, like those things, that anything that has to do with I could possibly transmit germs unknowingly, because part of the challenge of COVID, I mean, there's so many, but is, especially in the United States, is by the time you have a temperature, you've already been running around with it for days.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
and spreading it. So I've had to really back off of, and parties, social engagements, like that was one thing. Open houses, all these things that were still important before COVID. For open houses was a big one. I was doing lots of open houses to get new clients. um, I was dropping off gift baskets, and I was having parties. I would have like social gatherings and invite you know my friends, family, past clients, to get basically, like, both appreciation for the role that they play in my success as a real estate agent, but also referrals. So
Yes.
you can't do any of those things. So now, yeah, there's a huge emphasis on social media and using the internet and marketing online.
Yes.
So, like I said, that had been in the works anyway, but now it's like 100. That's all your energy is going there. There's no kind of, well, I'll do a little over here, a little over there. I'm almost entirely doing stuff online and phone calls, texting and phone calls.
Yes.
Um, so that's been some of the changes for me. Um, you asked me something else. Oh,
Um,
so I guess that
yeah,
the
and
other
then
thing that
just having to adapt, and and how you see the industry moving forward.
I think so. I think that this has propelled us. Like this has literally taken us, jumped us, 20 years in advance from where we probably would have been without COVID.
Yes.
Would have been a much slower progression. I think this is going to weed out a lot of real estate agents because the ways that you were able to market before aren't there. Um, so I think we're going to see a shift in who's I think you're gonna see a lot of falling away of people. They're either gonna retire or they're just not gonna be able to make the kind of money they thought, and they'll have to transition out. I think that is definitely gonna be a result of COVID. I think um, the other piece is the strong recognition of without open houses, people are driven and people are sitting around all the time. I mean, anybody that's remotely interested in the real estate business anyway, or real estate market, or thinking about changing their space is doing all of their own research online. So now we have to get really clear about what's our added value as real estate agents, because so much of it's out there for them. What do they need me for? So
Yes.
getting really clear with like, what's my role in all of this? And I
Mm.
think for me, it's the data driven piece, right? It's like they might be able to look at Zillow. First of all, Zillow and they are usually out of date by a couple of days because they're getting it third party, and I have access to more information. I also work with Compass, and Compass as a national brokerage who has some really creative. I mean, it's a millennial tech company basically,
Yes.
and they are so on top of using technology for the purposes of sales and marketing. So they are constantly innovating. And one of the things that I can do that a lot of other agents don't do is private exclusive. So we as agents share all of our properties with each other. Now, it existed before in a different way where they would
Yes.
do a couple days before a house would go on the market. You would do like a train or a broker's open where you'd go pop by the house if you thought that it was an interest to one of your clients. But Compass does it all online amongst the agents. So I can't advertise in general these properties, but if I have clients, I can share them with my clients. So
Yes.
I have access to properties before they are ever seen at the wider market, and I can get my clients in to see them. So that's one of the ways that Compass is innovated that serves me very well. I also do a lot of data collection, right? Just looking at the market, what's going on. I also spend way too much time online looking at houses for different reasons.
Mm.
How fast are they selling? What's the price point that they're selling at? And I can share all of that information with my clients when they're so much more limited to like, what's the house look like and what are the pictures? So I think those are some of the other ways that we're changing how we behave and what our value added is to our clients. Certainly I
Yes.
am. Yeah.
So in the real estate market, obviously we've spoken about how very competitive it is. So what would you say makes your negotiation style different? And what do you do differently to ensure that your clients come back, and to maintain long-standing relationships within the world of real estate?
I think that my negotiation strategy comes from a lot of learning, as I mentioned before, and skill building and workshops. And I've learned a couple things. Number one, if you don't ask for it, you're definitely not going to get it.
Yes,
So ask for what you want. Even if you don't get it, like, ask for what you want, and hope for the best. I mean, that's really all you can do is ask to get
yes,
started anyway.
yes,
The other one is setting the expectations of everybody around me in the process. I think that is essential for negotiations going well. If you overpromise, and you can't deliver, you're going to have pissed off clients.
yes,
So I work really hard not to do that.
yeah,
Um, one of the ways that I do that, for instance, is like in the market right now in Philadelphia, it's very low inventory and there's a lot of people who want to move and they've been waiting to move, and the spring was basically shut down here. So now when you look at a house price, what I say to my clients from the outset is whatever number you're looking at, add $20,000 to it if you actually want to get the house. So if the max that you can spend is $400,000, don't look at houses that are $400,000 because you're not going to be competitive, because they're not being sold at 400, they're being sold at 425.
yeah,
So like that's one of the ways that I can sort of demonstrate that, or give an example for how I talk with my clients about the negotiation piece. um, um, the other part of that question, how do I maintain long-term
yes,
relationships? I think that has to do a lot with following up. I mean, it's actually really simple. It's just a matter of making time to do it,
yes,
and making it a priority, right? So I send newsletters every month. I send outreach emails. I text people. I give them a call and just check in. I send a lot of. I'm still doing some mailings. I do them fairly limited, I'm still doing them just as a hey, like what's going on? How are you? Or send a card, dropping things like, happy birthday. And some of it's like Facebook stuff, right? I mean, I'm old enough that we're still using Facebook and Instagram a little bit less, but
yeah,
um, so doing a lot of paying attention to little details so that they know that you're thinking of them and you're following up and you're letting them know what's going on in the market, or um, if there's some new useful bit of information I can give them, I will send out an email. So that's really it. It's just repetitive, right? Repetitive,
yes,
like being consistent, following up, checking in on them. Hey, what's going on with your house? A lot of my millennial clients buy older houses and focus on fixing them up. And so I'm asking, like, are you done yet? Can I come see it? Are you done yet? Can I come see it? Because I want to go over and see what they've done, because some of them are
yes.
just phenomenal. So that's the crux of that, I would say, for sure.
Okay. So there are very few situations that rattle you, and you are very strong and grounded as a negotiator. So how and where do you believe you learned the skill, or was this something you always were outstanding at, or did you develop this skill?
The skill of
Well, to be a
not getting
strong, grounded
wrestled.
negotiator, because it's like you say, some people it's not a strength and it's something that has to be worked on, but you seem to be very grounded in terms of your negotiating skills. So, was it something you learned, or was it something that you just always that was always there?
Oh, it was definitely learned. I don't know. Um, yeah, okay. So it was definitely learned. I don't, it's like I'm trying to think back, like when I was a kid, was I that? Like, whereas I think some people probably are. No, for me, it was learned. And I think it was about learning how to be empowered. I
Yes,
really, I didn't know, and it's still, there's still a fairly substantial difference between advocating and negotiating on my own behalf than on my client's behalf, right?
Yes.
It's I can be much more detached um and you know um detached and appropriately passionate, but not emotional when
Yes.
when I'm advocating for my clients. I still think it's probably an ongoing learning process in all regards, both with clients and myself. But certainly when it comes to negotiating for myself, that has come much later in life. I think a lot of it had to do with being in student politics. Like I mentioned, I did a lot of work as an so student politics in Canada is a really big deal. And people who, it's like a training ground for politics, for sort of regular national level or provincial level politics. So we were really active and engaged, and we did a lot of negotiating on behalf of graduate students, both at the level of the university, with other organizations, with our provincial organization and our national organization. So we were, and Montreal and Quebecers are um, very like the French, right? They really use and leverage power to negotiate, to have their voices heard, right? Whether it's like truck stoppages or blockades, or all these different things that they do in order to to be heard and for their needs to be met, if you will. So I got a lot of that training up at school at McGill, and then it continued when I was working with students, because students will push. They
Yes.
want to push and they want things their way. And the more that um, they have learned over the years that if they scream the loudest, they will get their way with parents, I think, largely. That then they come into a master's program and I have to negotiate with them. So I've also learned how to negotiate it, that sort of also, I guess, enabled my skills to be honed and further develop. um, so yeah, definitely learned, all learned. Trying to
Amazing.
think of those.
Amazing. So what are the three key pieces of advice you would give to others looking to pursue a career in the real estate industry?
Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Um, and that's a hard one. I mean, that was definitely a hard one for me, and it's something that I am now better at. But if you're not willing to get uncomfortable, you're not going to grow. One of the biggest things that that most of us can't stand is like cold calling people, picking up the phone. It's like, I don't want to be on the receiving end of a cold call. I don't actually cold call. Some people do, but like that's one of the things where, so whether it's cold calling somebody or, um, reaching out when you know that somebody might be annoyed or pissed off. And like, I always worry, in the back of my head, I'll send out emails and newsletters and I think, am I sending out too many? Are they going to get annoyed? Like, what should I do that? How do I, and then, but recognizing that like I can acknowledge those fears in myself and do it anyway,
Yes.
even though it makes me kind of scared, or like I'm worried about, am I going to piss people off? So being okay with like, I'm going to have to get uncomfortable in order to succeed in this business. And like, I'll never forget, I had this moment. There was a house across the street from me that was obviously being flipped. And so I went over and I was like, hey, do you have a real estate agent? Like, are you going to sell this? What are you doing with it? Blah, blah, blah. And it happened that the guy who owned the house was there. So we ended up having this nice conversation. Like, I do have an agent. Okay. But we had a great conversation, gave my card, just in the whole like, well, he said, give me your card because I do other properties and sometimes I use other agents. Okay, whatever. He calls me up a couple days later and said, oh, I see you have a PhD. I looked up your profile. I read one of your articles in 500 pens from, I'm thinking that must have been like 7 years ago. Um,
Wow.
and I ended up doing business with him. And I had this moment of thinking like, wow, who was that went over there? Just like, kind of, sort of just very self-confidently going over like, hey, I'm just going to introduce myself. And I realized I'm like, that was a moment of recognized growth. You know what I mean? Like where I was like, wow, look how I've grown. Like I
Yes.
couldn't have done that a year ago. Like I was, I've been sitting there staring at it thinking I should go over there. I should go over there. I should go over there, and I
Mm.
did. And so the getting uncomfortable with things is, yeah, that's a big one. I practice the Serenity Prayer, which is, letting go of things you cannot control, like recognizing the difference between what I can control and what I can't control. Like there
Yeah.
are things in this business that I'm just powerless over. I can put together the best possible offer to get a house. I have no control. I can call the agent and have 47 conversations with them. At the end of the day, I cannot control whether our offer was chosen or not. All
Exactly.
I can, so you're
Yeah.
like, and I can get uptight and stressed out and frustrated, but what's the point of that?
Yeah.
So the Serenity Prayer, I practice that. I meditate, and I constantly affirm my belief in myself and my abilities on a daily basis because I need to reassure myself that I can do this.
Yeah.
Because I think if we don't believe in ourselves, you're definitely not going to be able to do this. I mean, that's kind of an obvious thing, but I think a lot of times we get stuck in our own fears. Um,
Absolutely. And we get in our own way.
Oh my God, constantly in our own way. Yeah, yeah. And I think when you lose opportunities and you realize, so this is the last one I would say, is like really reflecting, constantly reflecting on um sort of winning wins and losses.
Yeah.
Um and learning from every transaction because there is something that I've learned, if not many things that I've learned in each and every transaction and from each and every conversation I have with another agent, because there's a lot of agents out there that know a lot more than I do. And
Yeah.
I want to absorb from them. Like I am absolutely all ears. Tell me what I need to do. Tell me how to succeed. Like I'll read books, like I'll listen. I definitely like, I think approaching this job with humility, which is like, there's always more to learn is, is the other one. Like nobody knows it all,
No.
and every interaction is a different one. So you can come with some guidelines and suggestions that I bring with me to every transaction, but that doesn't mean that they're going to work. So I need to learn to improvise. So constantly reflecting on how I'm doing things and what I'm doing is the way for me to improve. And I think that reflection that's a skill too. I think
Yes.
reflecting is a skill. Like, no, I don't know that, I think some people just, at least I have at moments in the past kind of gone, oh, well, oh, well, that didn't work. And it's like, right, but why didn't it work?
Yeah.
And maybe you're not going to come up with an answer, but at least it's a good question to ask. So I think that self-reflection piece and reflecting on my business practices is a really good one that I would pass on to people. Yeah. You
Amazing.
know,
So that leads me to the last question. What legacy would you like to leave, or how would you like to be remembered?
mm, that's a really good question. And I'm not, I think that I, it's a good one. And I was thinking about this, um, a lot before our conversation because I think it's a legacy more of my life
Yes.
in all of it than it is in the real estate in particular, although it's all the same, right? And
Yeah.
it's that I want to leave the world a little better off than how I found it,
Yes.
you know, to however many people I can possibly affect. I want to have a positive ripple effect out in the world. So with my clients, with other agents, and I want my family, my friends, so whatever um, path I stay on for however long I stay on it, I want I want to create positive relationships. I want to respect other people and I want to be respected. I want to treat people with kindness, love, and compassion. And I hope that other people will be able to do the same. Like that somehow my approach to my life of learning and self-reflection and transformation, growth, like that mindset, I just hope that I can be part of the solution, you know? And I mean, what
Absolutely.
solution it doesn't even matter which one, you know what I mean? Like I don't think I have to pick one problem to
No, not at
solve.
all.
You know what I mean? Like I'm like,
Yeah.
well, for a long time I really did think when I was in academia that like that's what the focus is, right? Find one little thing and focus all your time and attention on this one thing, become an expert in it, and like try to figure out how you can do something with it, right? And sometimes
Yes.
it is it's just about studying it and reporting, depending on what field you're in. But I think for me, it's just a lifelong goal of like having a positive impact on the world and making the world a little bit of a better place, bringing a little bit of happiness, joy, positivity to people's lives, whether through real estate or through any other activity I engage in. So that's it. And to have some fun in the
Yes.
process,
It's always
laughter,
important.
yeah, like laughter, joy, adventure. I mean, I look at life as one big adventure. So,
Yeah.
I'm definitely like I'm all in, and like hopefully that is, I can make that a little contagious, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for joining us on the podcast. If people would like to get in contact with you, what are the best platforms to do so?
You can look up Amy Cox Real Estate, all one, on Facebook.
Okay,
It's also Amy Cox Real Estate at gmail.com if you want to email me. You can also find me on Compasses. You can find me on Instagram, Amy Cox
okay,
Real Estate on Instagram. Um, and I'm on Compass's website as well for my, like, you know, my Compass profile, which is Amy Cox Compass. I'm actually like, what
perfect.
is, yeah.
Perfect.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we can have you back in the future to see where you are in your real estate and life journey. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great. And it's always helpful to, like, for me to pause and reflect and just kind of think about where I'm at. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.